Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So this should take all of about 15 minutes, and actually it's very interesting how long it takes, really. To John's point there, I mean, one of the things that we're really trying to do is change this whole ecosystem and allow people to, once they have a good model, to go ahead and publish it, make it very easy to publish such that the model is accessible from applications that you may build or potentially sell that model as from an endpoint perspective. And if I take a look at the steps, the steps here, we've already covered the first square, which is just the provision of workspace, right? And that's what we did when we first started the day. We got a subscription, and we created a workspace to get going. Recall that in the first presentation that when I spoke, we talked about this workflow. And up through now, we've been in the middle box there. We've been building the ML model. We've been preparing data from various different resources. We're building experiments. We're creating and updating a model. We're evaluating model results. I think John's last presentation was very atypical of building the ML model. So the last thing to do is publishing a web service. And there are a number of steps that we're going to do. We're going to, first, we're going to use where John left off. We're going to pick up that model, that exercise. We're going to create what's called a scoring graph. Then we're going to add in and output ports. What you're doing there is you're defining the inputs into the REST API and the outputs to that REST API. So it's your request response, basically. And then we're going to, with a click of a button, publish it to a web service. And right from there, the Azure ML, what it's going to do, it's going to create a web service. And then after that, we're going to do some massaging of some of the help that gets automatically generated, and then deploy it to production. So it's 4 steps, but it's actually just a few modules actually in the exercise. So why don't I go ahead and demonstrate that real quick. And let me just pull this closer and log in. Okay, get rid of email. And this is the deck here. But let me go ahead, and I have to log into Azure ML again. Just give me 1 second here. Yep. Okay. Go to the portal. Does that look good? Okay, and let's see. I think this is the one. I have a number of workspaces set up here. Okay. Yep. So, so this is kind of where John had left off. Actually, in John's exercise, what you'll see in the PowerPoint presentation is where we actually experiment across 3 models: an SVM, a linear regression, and a boosted tree. John did 2, and I think in here I didn't do the boosted tree that he did, but I have the 2-class support vector and the 2-class logistical regression model. So the first step is that we've gone through this exercise and we've made a decision about which model is performing the best. So we can go ahead now and eliminate some of the other models, as well as some of the modules that fall underneath there that help us determine which module was the best one. So we're going to do that. So in my case, what I would do is, let's suppose the SVM model was the best model. So I'm going to go ahead and delete a number. I'm going to delete the two-class logical regression model and the things underneath. And again, what I'm trying to do is create, my goal here is to create a scoring model. So let me go ahead and delete these things. A couple more here. Okay. I have that. And then the other thing too that I want to do is up here, just for this particular experiment, in the missing values scrubber, what we did was we identified here that we wanted to create an indicator column. We wanted the service to go ahead and create one. So what I'm going to do here is say do not generate, because we don't want that indicator column to kind of show through the REST API. So let me do that, and this should, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And this should more or less look exactly like when John had first started out. We're fairly close to. And then after that, what I want to do is then capture the training model here and actually save it off, because that trained model is the model from which I'm going to go ahead and build that web service API. So let me just let this finish running. It ran. OK. And then you see this training model here. If you click, let me pull it out to the side here. And also let me expand this a little bit. Oop. Actually, it wasn't. There you go. Right here, I'm going to click on this. And there's an option here that says Save as Trained Model. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And let's kind of call this my census trained model. And hit OK. Now, what will happen is that as it's saving it, it created basically another submenu here. And you can see that it's called Census Trained Model. OK. So let's go ahead and save this entire experiment. And we're going to call it our new service, which is called the Income Predictor. OK. We're still creating that scoring model. So now what we want to do is we want to use that trained model that we had saved to create a scoring graph. So I'm going to go ahead and take this trained model and drag it and drop it on top of here. And then I no longer need a whole bunch of this stuff anymore, because again, this was utilized for me to evaluate which model would be best. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate a bunch of these things. So I'm going to eliminate this. I'm going to eliminate the trained model. I'm going to also eliminate the left scoring model here, the evaluations, the sweep parameters. And boom, boom, boom. Let's see if I eliminated enough here. Let's hope I didn't eliminate too much. Let me just do this real quick. OK, sorry. So we got, let me just take a look here. We don't need these either. The scoring one here? Yeah. Scoring is kind of the only one you need. Yeah, let me just take a look. That and the trained model. Let me just, let's see what I got. I got the adult census, adult census income. I got the missing values. I got project columns. Yep, I need the scoring model. Let me eliminate those two. And bring this one back up here. And bring the census trade one. Yeah.
One of the features that is coming is that you won't have to create a separate experiment to do the web service. It'll just be a different view in the same experiment. It'll sort of infer what you need. So you won't have to do this whole take my training thing and do it.
Redo it.
It'll just sort of create a different view.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That would be really great. It'd be awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the idea is you've got this trained model. All you really want to do is any data pre-processing and scoring.
Yep, yep. Good, good, good. The other thing, too, we want to do is when we project the columns, we want to add one more column here to exclude, and that's the income value. Remember that it was the income that we were predicting, so we don't want to use that as an input. So let me go ahead and just add income over here and hit OK. So let me just go ahead and run this. This looks pretty good so far. Good, good. So the next thing I want to do is declare what my input and my outputs are to the web service. And I do that by selecting right here. This is my input data set into the scoring model. And if I click this here, I'm going to set that as my published input. And then similarly on the scoring module right here, if I select this, I could set this as my published output. Yeah?
Since you already have a training model, why do you need a school model here?
The trained model is just the learned parameters.
Right.
The scoring actually does the predictions.
Okay. Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let me go ahead and run this. Okay, that was quick. So the next step really would be publish as a web service. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go down here and click down here. And would you like to publish it? Say yes. And what's occurring right now is it actually went ahead and it took that model, it evaluated the inputs and the outputs. It created a request and response endpoint on a web service. It generated that web service and put it in a staging area. It also created a batch execution API interface, as well as some documentation too. So folks who are familiar with, for example, utilizing the Web API 2.0 that's in ASP.NET, for example, you can automatically generate a lot of the documentation such that anybody who pings that site can get an indication of what that might be. So let's take a look at that real quick. So this is basically the dashboard to my web service, and you'll notice here too that I'm now hovered over the web services tab right here, and this is the dashboard, and that's the name of the experiment that I named earlier, the income predictor. I could provide a description for this service, and I'll do that through the configuration. Again, this is the API help page for the request response, and the API help page for batch execution. So let's go to configuration here. And in configuration, this is where I can provide some additional information to primarily affect the documentation of the site. So for example, here's the display name and the description if I wanted to add that. It's not configured yet for production. I have to flip the switch when I'm ready. But you know, I remember here's the input schema that I'm going to be requesting on my REST API. And here's the output. You'll see, for example, down here is the scored labels as well as the score probabilities. So let's just try to do one thing here. For example, if you remember, we scanned the data a little bit, fairly quickly a little bit earlier, but the education enum is a bit cryptic for an end user. So I can actually go ahead and type in some description information that I might want to provide in the help page. So let's just kind of call this education. Oh, I gotta spell it right. Education. Education enum, and I know, for example, masters equates to a value of 14 in the column because that was through scanning the data, and a bachelor's degree equates to a value of 13. There you go. And I could save this. So now if I go back to the dashboard and take a look, for example, at the API help page and the request response here, I'll see all kinds of information. And this is what would be public to somebody who wants to call the application. I can I have an OData interface. I have a post that describes basically what the request might look like. I also have the request headers and the request body. So these are all kinds of inputs here. So this is a sample request and how I might package that up. Here's my response and response headers and some common REST API error codes. So these are the values that I'll get back in my response. And then it also generates some sample code in both C#, Python, and R. So I could technically go ahead and cut and paste this and put this right directly in my application, and should be getting up and going pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and test it, and we'll see how it's working. How about that? The next thing I want to do is go back to the dashboard here. Yep, it's just right here. And right here you see this little hyperlink called test, and it's going to generate a pop-up. So let's just type in some values here. Let's say this person is 40 years old, has a master's degree, and you can kind of see right above that edit field is where I entered the description of the education enum. So here, what I'll do is I'll enter 14. The person has a master's degree, never married, and again, I'm being very specific about the values that I enter here, and that's only because I've had the opportunity to kind of scan the data. You'd obviously do a much better job in providing guidance to end users of what valid values might be. But you know what? I'll hit never married, and unmarried is my current relationship. Race, let's put white, male. We'll leave capital gain and capital loss blank for now, and let's just kind of say that I work 60 hours a week. So what it's doing is actually making a call to the REST service. It's testing it and returning back a value. So if I click over here and I take a look at the details, and what I get returned back is the values that I had submitted in there, and also the outcome. So greater than 50K with I guess a 59% probability. Yeah.
Is the functionality of traffic control say a user cannot invoke this service more than 7 times a second?
You know what? I don't actually. So the question is how do you put, like, for example, governors on the website and integrate that? I'm not familiar about how I might lift this and put this into an environment where I could do those kinds of things.
I may be not understanding your question, but so this part of the service was done in quite a high scalable, robust way, and they're designing for thousands of calls a second.
Right. For example, the website Stack Overflow does not allow you to call to query more than 5 times.
There's some services like weather services that they put a governor on there that you can't call the same service from the same IP, say no more than like 10 times a minute.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there are those limits. I think they're saying, well, in some cases that could be legitimate.
Right.
Yeah. What you might have to do is maybe host basically a web service in front of this that has some of those governances put in place, including authentication and authorization and stuff.
Well, this is you said the magic word,
yeah.
Authentication, and there's all of these APIs are keyed,
yeah.
And you may or may not want the public to call them, or you may want to say, look, it's going to cost you to have this key, and in some cases, actually, we're sort of announcing today that you can actually publish to the Azure data market with these things. And there, you can put a cost schedule for actually, you can say, every API call is going to cost you money. Or you may say the first X thousand are free, and then beyond that, it's going to cost you money. And so, again, it's sort of key to an account. So you'd actually need.
Actually, it would be great if the marketplace can give you an estimate to help you pricing
Yes.
Yes,
That's all there. It is
Okay.
doing
Okay.
exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving away part of the 4 o'clock talk, but there will be another button that says publish to the Azure Data Marketplace. In which case you can monetize these if you want to.
Okay.
And also have help documentation, links to sample apps for calling it and all of that.
Okay.
So it's a much more complete publishing solution.
Thanks.
And at Strata today, I think they're announcing that Microsoft is publishing 15 services today based on this. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's it with the workshop. We kind of breezed through it today. It's a much smaller crowd and easier to manage. So, thank you very much for taking a good amount of time out during your day. Do you guys have any comments or feedback that you want to provide? We're going to meet again at 4 o'clock, and I think John's a lot closer to the product team, and we can just discuss basically, futures as well as take input from what you've seen.